Thank you for coming to the Veteran Law Student Organization event on Veterans Day today. I'm Chad Lennon. I'm the president of the organization. The Veteran Law Student Organization was started last year. It's an organization so veterans can come together. No one knows a veteran better than another veteran. So I want to establish some place where veterans can come together, as well as anyone who's interested in veteran issues, whether you've served, your parents, or you're just interested in the military or what veterans go through. This is what the organization is for. We also had the Veterans Clinic, which we try to work with on various different issues. It's just headed by Dean Rosenblum, who couldn't join us today. But he's out doing another event for Veterans Day, and as you can imagine, it's a very busy day for veterans. So first, I'd like to thank Judge Lazer and Captain Van Thach for coming in to speak today. Judge Lazer served for 3.5 years in the U.S. Army during World War II, from the Normandy invasion to the Battle of the Bulge and the liberation of Germany. He graduated from NYU, went on to be an attorney as well as a judge, where he was serving as the Justice of the State Supreme Court Appellate Division, the Second Department, and he's been a longtime chair for the Pattern Jury Instructions Committee. Sir, on behalf of the organization, I just want to give you this hat and pin that says, "I'm Touro and I'm a veteran."
Okay, thank you.
And from all of us, and myself especially, thank you for your service. Veterans or service members like myself couldn't be able to do today what we did without people like yourself paving the way for us, so thank you. I'd also like to welcome Captain Van Thach, as well as his uncle Paul Lee. Captain Van Thach is a recipient of the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star. He's the first Vietnamese American to become an advisor to the new Iraqi army, and he received the honorary title of Brigadier General by the Iraqi government. He was injured in Iraq from an IED explosion. However, he recovered from those injuries, and unfortunately, he was also injured in a rocket attack. The rocket exploded about 20 meters from where he was standing, and unfortunately was injured and had to be retired from the Army in 2009. He's alumni of the school and graduated in 2002. He turned down the JAG opportunity, which is the lawyer in the military, twice to stay with the infantry. In 2003, he recovered enough from his injuries to do what's called Operation Proper Exit. What this is for anyone who was injured in Iraq, Afghanistan, in a battle zone and was left medically, they were allowed to go back to that area and return to the States on their own recognizance, or excuse me, on their own terms. He was able to speak to over 1,500 troops while there, talking about his wounds, his service. His service dog's not here today. He's resting up for another event that Captain Van Thach will be going to. He's now a certified suicide prevention specialist. If you don't know, suicide is a very big issue for veterans and military alike. Not just those who are serving now and younger, but those who have served in Vietnam and afterwards, or before that time. There is one every 22 hours, one veteran every 22 hours. Is that correct? With the
One every 65 minutes.
22 a day. 22 veterans a day take their own life, so it's a very big issue. He utilizes his law school degree right now to advocate for human rights at the United Nations. Gentlemen, on behalf of the Veterans Organization, I'd like to present to you also the hat and the pin that says, "I'm Touro and I'm a veteran."
Thank you.
Also, for those that are still serving, wouldn't be able to do today without what Captain Van Thach has done before us. So first, I'd like to ask Judge Lazer to come on up and speak a little bit about his time in the military. Possibly had that led to a life in the law. So, ladies and gentlemen, Judge Lazer.
I want to thank you all for this opportunity and to remind me of my military service, because after I got the invitation to appear here, I went to these various boxes of photographs and letters and stuff that I had. Brought a few here. And sort of upbraided myself that so many years had passed and I had never reread the old letters from Europe, and I had not even looked at the old photographs. I am very upset by the way the military is treated by the rest of the citizenry of the United States. It's sometimes said that 1% of the country, and that's the military and their families, carries the foreign policy of this country as far as the military end of it is concerned. And the rest of the country, has bumper stickers that you can stick things on, say, we support our troops and so on. But the guys and the families who sacrifice their life and limb really don't receive the respect that they should have. And the Veterans Administration scandal within the past year demonstrates how nobody really cares. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but that the country really doesn't care, and it's a big headline, and isn't it awful, and then we go on to other things. But the debt that's owed to people who have done 1, 2, 3, 4, more than that tours to Iraq and Afghanistan is immeasurable. And I frequently feel hurt at the fact that anybody should have to serve that many courses in those dreadful places and play the law of averages that will bring that person back safe and with all the limbs intact. Having said all of that, that's on my chest. I served for 3.5 years in the Signal Corps, not the infantry, and so I didn't get shot at very often. And but we did all of the campaigns running from Normandy, Central Europe, the Rhine, Battle of France, and so on. So when I left the service, I had 5 battle stars for each of the campaigns in which my unit was involved. I have a photograph here that I'll pass around of landing at Utah Beach, but 3 weeks after D-Day, and there wasn't a German except for prisoners within 5 miles. However, the photograph is interesting. So we landed, and the Allied armies were confined to Normandy to a depth of only 20 miles, and so all of the fields were packed with troops. When we landed, they had to find a place for my unit to simply put out the pup tents and stay there until the breakout. The planned breakout was that the British Army and the Canadian Army, to our left, was going to break out at a city called Caen, C-A-E-N, and then swing along the French coast. And the First Army, of which my unit was a part, was going to swing around to the south and try to envelop the Germans. Well, as it turned out, the British Army, which was pretty much of a failure during World War II anyway, failed to break out, so it was left to us, and we broke out at St. Lo, and then swung around, and once the Germans started to retreat, then of course the British could go along the coast and liberate all the cities. I was still in Normandy with my signal unit when our army, the American army, liberated Paris, and I listened to the liberation on the radio. I understood quite a bit of French, and the roaring crowds and so on, and then shortly after that, we departed, and I have a photograph here of my unit in the trucks approaching the Arc de Triomphe, which was one of the great thrills I had during the campaign. Uh, Anyway, you got out by the number of points you had, which was length of service, and how many battle stars you had. My unit had 5 battle stars, so I had 25 points to start with, and got out in November of 1945 with scabies. And I didn't want to tell the folks in the Army that I had scabies, because then they'd keep me in and cure me of the scabies. So I came home and got the scabies treated privately. One of the great thrills, of course, was when the Victory ship on which we came home through a North Atlantic storm in November arrived, and I was able to call my parents with a coin telephone that I was back, and the other was, of course, walking from the subway with a load on my back and coming home. One of the great and I'm going to wind this up, it'll go on forever. One of the great dangers that I was in Normandy was we were right next to a anti-aircraft unit, and the Germans would only come over at night because we had control of the air, so Bed Check Charlie used to come over at night, and when the anti-aircraft units started to fire, the sound that shook you is not reproducible, and I think the other veterans here have heard artillery fire and how that shakes you. That wasn't a problem. The problem was whatever goes up comes down, and then these large chunks of metal would come down, and we were right next to where they were being fired from, and so one big piece landed about 8 feet from me, which is about as close I came to getting killed in the campaign. In any event, I don't want to take up any more time. People have done much more than I did and sacrificed much more than I did, so I thank you for the recognition that you are providing here, and I'm going to pass around a couple of photographs. Please return them. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Lazer. Next, we're going to have Captain Van Thach come up and speak for us for a few minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure and honor to be here, especially on behalf of fellow veterans here, as well as fellow students and faculty who have family members of veterans, or if you know of a fellow veteran. Also, on behalf of the veterans that could not be here and who are laying in our national cemeteries right here in Long Island, as well as around our country and at national cemeteries overseas, our fellow veterans. I'd like to take a moment and think about them too as well. Because without them and the fellow veterans that came before me as the judge, our opportunity that we have here at this law school would not be possible. For me, service is very important because my mother came here on a fiancé visa in 1973 from South Vietnam. My father is a World War II Korea and Vietnam veteran, and he's also a retired NYPD officer. So that was instilled to me at a very young age. While I was at Touro Law School at the old campus in Huntington, about 6 months prior, September 11th had occurred. And at that time, my goal was to become a JAG officer. But when that experience had occurred, I was also volunteering as auxiliary police officer at the 105th Precinct in Queens. And a lot of the police officers were then transferred over to the World Trade Center for rescue, and later on it was recovery. And they asked for fellow volunteers in auxiliary police to help with the additional volunteering in scanning and surveillance of specifically Jewish neighborhoods, as well as the Jewish cemeteries that were located in Queens, where the Grand Rebbe is buried, because there were intelligence that there would be targets from extremists. I decided, even though I was a full-time student at Touro Law School, I would volunteer. And if you're aware what auxiliary police tasks are, just supervise, observe, and report. The only weapon I have is my radio and my baton, and there was no knife, no weapon of sort like a firearm. So at that time, I was ready to give my life to assist to protect our fellow Americans of the Jewish faith at their schools, at their homes, at their synagogues, as well as at their cemeteries. At that moment, I felt that for me, myself, that my mother had to leave her country, could not return after the communists took over South Vietnam in '75, that I did not want that to happen to my fellow Americans of the Jewish faith, as well as my own family, that we would have to leave our country and become refugees someplace else. So it was very important for me to serve, and that's the reason why I did. Unfortunately, because of my injuries, it's been very difficult. I suffered a traumatic brain injury. I'm not able to take on and pursue my legal profession, but it's something I'm working on very vigorously. I'm a patient over at the Northport VA. Been there for a little over 5 years now, and I'm working on my cognitive thought process and my memory, so I can be up to par and be able to be cognitively disciplined, where I can take on a bar review course to take the bar exam. But while I do that, my passion right now as well is to help my fellow veterans, the ones that are in need. As my fellow veteran chatter pointed out, one veteran every 65 minutes is committing suicide. That's 22 veterans a day, just right here in the United States. And we're not even talking about our fellow allies up in Canada, the UK, Australia, Israel, as well as our NATO partners. For me, just talking about it just gives me goosebumps, you know? And I go out along with my uncle, Paul Allen Lee, who's also a Vietnam veteran, prisoner of war during the Vietnam War. And we go out and volunteer and speak to veterans that are in crisis, free of charge, because it fulfills the passion, keeps me going, as well as I'm working on my rehab at the Northport VA Hospital. Two acronyms that I've made up myself. Those of you in the military, you know that military acronyms, as well as law school acronyms, are very important into getting by and getting to the next step. The acronym that I cherish and I speak to fellow veterans, and also fellow civilians can use it too, is don't be lost at sea, find yourself a pal. Don't be lost at sea. Don't feel shy, embarrassed, ashamed of your injuries, of what you're going through in life. What you need to do is to find a pal. What's a pal? Find passion, what you want to do with your life. Aspire to it. Get the legal education, take the course, meet the people that you can connect with. And then after you have those two, you have L, a legacy. You have a legacy for your family members, for your fellow veterans, the camaraderie, for your fellow civilians, your community, your culture, and our country. So don't be lost at sea, find yourself a pal. In closing, I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to speak here. The veterans of Touro Law School Association that invited me to come here. And also, I'd like to put out one point is, just this past September, I traveled to Israel with an organization called Heroes to Heroes that brings wounded troops from the States over to Israel. We were over there during the Hamas attacks on the state of Israel, and I traveled all throughout Israel for 12 days, meeting Israeli veterans, hospitals of veterans injured, as well as military bases. And it was very dangerous, but just to be there and expound on what we could connect with on fellow people that believe in democracy, that are under attack by these extremists. It is very meeting and passionate for me, even though the danger that we were at. When we left one of the bases up in the Golan Heights, an hour later it was attacked and a fellow Israeli military brother was injured. And it's a threat that's happening every day in Israel, and it's a threat that we're under right here very closely in the United States. Thank you very much.
So ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank you for coming. Today's Veterans Day. It's not about sales. It's not about a day off. It's about those veterans that are serving around you that you might not even know. As of right now, we've recognized about 10 veterans at this school, but you also have veterans that work here, whether as teachers or faculty. And sometimes you will never know this. I just found myself today finding another veteran that works at school, and I've known him for a year. So veterans are out there, and right now just to say, everyone who is here is a veteran, to please stand up. Go ahead, I'm going to embarrass you. So thank you. So in the future, if anyone has any questions, whether it's veteran issues, military issues, I'm readily available to help in any way that I can, and I know any of the other veterans here, as well as Dean Rosenblum. If you know a veteran in need, just be there for them. That's the most important thing. Be that friend for them. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and have a good day.